Friends, welcome back to Being and Making Disciples. We are very excited to have with us two guests from the USCCA. That's the U.S. Catholic China Association. And the USCCA is inspired by the gospel, the mission of which is to build bridges of friendship and dialogue between the people of China and the United States by offering educational, service, and cultural programs in support of the church and larger society. So they host study tours so that Americans can go to China and learn about the circumstances of the church there. They send mission speakers throughout America to raise awareness about this. They host national conferences on issues facing the church in China and provide key resources so that we, the people in the United States, can learn more about our brothers and sisters in China who are striving to live the gospel and follow in the footsteps of Jesus. So, Father Michael Agliardo and Father Peter Lee, thank you so much for joining us tonight. This is really a pleasure for us. So, we'd love for you to share a little bit about who you are and how the Lord called you to this ministry.
Well, it's a privilege to be able to appear with you, and I would like to thank you very much for this ministry that you provide for the church and for God's people. I thought I would talk first. Father Peter is just catching his breath. I just picked him up from the airport. He's not coming from China. He's coming from Boston. Um, but as a New Yorker, I would consider that almost as foreign as China. Um, anyway, so Father Peter, I just told him about this podcast on the way here, and I just got permission for him to appear from the producers. So he's going to catch his breath while I just say a few words about myself. So originally, as Dan knows, I am from the New York area. My dad's from the Bronx. Come from a good working class family, and I found the Jesuits through history books. So that's how I ended up joining the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits. And I got in touch with them while I was in high school. After college, I entered. And as an undergrad, I had studied some Chinese history. The language I shied off from. It's quite daunting, but eventually I had to begin studying it. But the Jesuits encouraged my interest in China because the Society of Jesus has a very long history of involvement in China. Uh, one of the first companions of our founder, St. Ignatius, that was St. Francis Xavier. And he went from Europe to the Far East at Ignatius's request. He went to Indonesia, India, Japan, and he died on an island off the shores of China, hoping that someday China would be open to the gospel and to people bringing Christ's message of peace and love. And which is not to say that China is not a place that values peace, love, harmony, integrity, and value. It certainly does. But there was an opportunity for fellowship and for sharing the gospel with them. And Xavier died on the shores of this island, hoping that dream would be fulfilled. I myself, as I said, was encouraged by the Jesuits to continue in my interest with China. And one of the ways I fed that interest was by going to the conferences of the U.S. China Catholic Association and meeting people who had come back from China, or meeting priests and sisters and lay people from China who were enthused by their faith and wanted to share that with others. So that was part of my own growing formation as a young Jesuit. I ended up becoming a sociologist, and I was teaching at Loyola University Chicago when I became chair of the board of the China Association. I had been involved in their activities for many years. I took over as chair of the board. And then when our executive director was stepping down in 2017, I formed a search committee to find a new executive director. Fatal mistake. So they asked me to take over that job. And actually, since I had been involved in many different ways as chair of the board, I saw this as a wonderful opportunity to go full steam into this ministry. And it has been just a gift ever since. So that was 2018 when I took over.
Well, thanks so much. That's So you found yourself when you formed that search committee, and it sounds like that was providential. I think the Lord wants you doing this ministry.
Uh-huh.
And Father Peter, how about you?
Oh, I'm a crypto Catholic and from a very traditional Chinese Catholic family. On my father's side, I'm a fourth generation Catholic, and on my mother's side, I I am a fifth generation Catholic. Yeah.
Wow.
So I was raised up to be should be
Hmm.
like a Catholic. But when I was in teenager, I was so naughty and became a black sheep in my family. So my mother sent me to a local minor seminary. Yeah, I stayed there for 2 years. Um, those experiences really touched me. And then I went to a university. I stayed at the university for 1 year, but I decided to go to the major seminary. So finally, I went to the major seminary. And after graduation from the major seminary, the faculty asked me if I would like to serve at the seminary. So I said yes, yeah, my pleasure, yeah. So after serving at the seminary for 2.5 years, my seminary sent me the U.S. to get advanced religious studies because we cannot get advanced religious studies in mainland China. So I'm here to prepare for my future teaching at the seminaries. Yeah.
Gotcha. And where are you studying right now?
Right now at BC, I have been in the US for 4 years. I'm sponsored by Marino Brothers and Fathers. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
gotcha. So
And yep, go
are
ahead.
you at the Boston College School of Theology and Ministry?
Yeah, right,
Okay,
correct.
gotcha. So I studied there as well. So I had I was very very devoted to Father Tom Stegman and Father John Baldwin
Oh
and
yeah.
God rest his soul, Father Dan Harrington. You probably wouldn't know him and Father Dick Clifford. So many fond memories of my time there.
Yeah. Really excellent Jesus, like
Yeah,
Father Michael.
yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah, so you mentioned these names are very dear to me. So when I was in theology, Father Stegman was in my class.
oh wow, that's
And
fun.
I took classes with Dan Harrington, Father Dan Harrington, and Father Dick Clifford. They were just amazing,
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
Uh,
Wow. Well, small world. I know you said you were from the Bronx. My father-in-law is from the Bronx as well. Did you by chance go to St. Michael's?
no, I did not. So my dad is from the Bronx. I grew up in the suburbs, but
Oh, okay.
I
Gotcha.
still identify. You know.
Okay, I hear you. Yeah. So, well, we would really we're my whole life I have been interested in the church in the East. So when I was in high school, I really thought strongly about trying to learn Japanese or Chinese to be a missionary there, and that wasn't the so far that has not been the Lord's plan for my life. Although that could always change. So when you reached out to us, I thought this is providential because this has been important to me my whole life. And I was always very inspired by the stories of St. Francis Xavier and just the Jesuit missionaries in general, growing up learning about how courageous they were going all over the world to share the gospel. So, what can you tell us about the Catholic Church in China right now in terms of growth, needs, and assimilation into Chinese culture?
Well, those are big questions, and I'm going to defer to Father Peter. But I would say um, let's narrow that down. Maybe we get us one concrete question out of that and build on that.
Sure, yeah. How well is the church in China growing right now?
Now, would you? I have looked at some statistics um, from that are published by the Holy Spirit Study Center. Uh, there's not a lot of sociological research which could nail down all of these things. You know, China is very ambiguous, and if you ask somebody, "Are you this or that religion?" Um, the tendency is just to say no,
Hmm.
because that is not a gold feather in your cap.
Mhm.
You understand?
Yeah.
Mhm.
However, um, I think there are many different trends, and they're all moving in different directions at the same time. So one of the trends that we do see is that the traditional ways that Catholicism has flourished in China are breaking down in this
Mhm.
sense. Um, right now, China is experiencing the largest migration from the countryside to the cities that the world has ever seen. The cities are growing. Uh, Many of the towns have lost their adult members because they go to find jobs in factories and education outside, and they leave behind children and grandparents. So some of the fabric of rural life in different places is breaking down. And in many places, that affects the Catholic community because in China, um, you have this rather interesting phenomenon. Catholics are not evenly spread throughout the population. They usually are, they live in villages or areas that have been Catholic for a long time. And that's because Catholicism tends to be a shared experience. It's a part of a way of life with seasons and sacraments and feast days. And you don't do that by yourself. It's not just an idea, it's a shared experience. And so there are, just as in other places and in China, Catholicism is a communal thing. And so when those communities are breaking down, and when Catholics are going to the big city where they might not find support for their faith readily, they have to find a way of living and so forth. It does mean that some of the traditional patterns are breaking down, and the ways of handing on the faith that had existed previously are also breaking down. So in that respect, it's harder for past forms of Catholicism to continue on into the future the way they had been. But I've also seen um, people coming into the church that had no background in Catholicism, that they went to one of the churches in Beijing or some other large city, they spoke with people, and suddenly they found, well, this is something that touches my heart. Um, so I even met some people at the seminary where you
Mhm.
teach, some students there who came in who didn't have any, who did not come from
Yeah.
Catholic families.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so that's also an interesting phenomenon, and I don't think that would have happened maybe 40 years ago when Catholicism was much more communal and in a certain sense maybe a little bit ghettoized, if you
Mhm.
understand.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. Kind of circling the wagons, like
Mm-hmm.
this is our cluster.
Yeah,
So that
but
sounds if people can just kind of wander in and they take an interest in the faith, I think to me that says that there must be at least a growing acceptance of Catholicism in China.
well, let me defer to Father Peter. These are my impressions. I don't live in China. I don't know. What do you think about some of the things that I mentioned, or do you have anything that you would like to add?
Yeah, I agree with you. Things has changed a lot comparing to my childhood and now because China has changed a lot. As far as I know, China's economics have been increased rapidly, but I observed there is a great need for spirituality, particularly the youth, the youngsters in big cities. They have a great hunger, spiritual hunger. So on Sundays, if you go to the churches in Beijing, you will see the church normally is packed, and you will see lots of young people. Yeah.
Wow. So and
Yeah.
those young people might not be Catholic, but they're just curious about Catholicism and spirituality.
I think they're looking for a home for their hearts.
Hmm.
It's just like Pascal said, there's a God-shaped halo in our hearts, and nothing can fill it
Yeah,
except
yeah.
God. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a
I had a friend that was in China for business, and he actually went into a church. I think it was in Beijing. Came back with rosaries for all of us. But that was pretty neat. But I have to say, hearing you talk about the church in China doesn't sound a whole lot different to me than some of the trends for the church in the United States. We see a younger generation that seems to be moving away from God, but that longing in their heart is still there. And even the way that the faith is being transmitted here is changing a lot too. So it's just kind of interesting, the similarities, across the globe, because we're dealing with some of the exact same issues, and that 40 years ago, the faith was handed on very differently here in the United States as well.
Welcome to the postmodern world.
Yeah.
Yes, it's just
So-
postmodern.
All
Right?
bets are off.
Well, the global
Yeah.
economy,
Yeah.
right? The global world. I mean, we're all much more interconnected. So trends around the world seem to be a lot more similar nowadays. Yeah, than 40 years ago, things were different around the world. So kind of interesting. So, I think sometimes it feels like a Catholic American, and you want to know what's going on with the church in China. You don't really know what to read or what sources to listen to. So would just love to hear from both of you. What are the needs of the church in China right now, and how can we support the church in China? What are the best things American Catholics can do for the church in China?
Well, so I'm going to cite the program that Father Peter is in. Okay, so Maryknoll has been a fantastic organization. If there are young people who are thinking of giving their lives to God, you might want to take a look at Maryknoll as well as the Jesuits. But right now, they have a program where they bring a number of priests and sisters each year to the United States for graduate study, so that they can go back and be professors, teach their sisters in formation, teach the young seminarians, teach the lay people the faith, and in this way to bring some of the insights and experience of the United States and of the West back to China. And by that experience, I mean not all the craziness of our culture.
You don't need all of our culture.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, it's got there's some things that are worth sharing, right? But not everything. Um, but we are a church in the United States that is grappling with the individualism, the cultural change, the materialism, the questioning that modernity has brought. All those things can be good if the church faces them head on, because those challenges help you to grow in your own faith. And I think if we can share that experience through these professors who come here or budding professors, they can help our Chinese brothers and sisters also have the courage to face change with hope. One of the great things about St. Ignatius, and this is what attracted me to the Jesuits, is this charism that he had of going into the unknown, going into new circumstances, always knowing that God is there, and finding where is God in the moment? Where is God at work in these circumstances? How is God already touching the lives and the hearts of the people that I'm encountering? And so the Jesuits had this art of what I would call, well, it's not what I would call, it's what we call spiritual conversation. In other words, talking with people about their lives and helping them to articulate the deep spiritual significance of what is happening there. So that's, I think that charism of the Jesuits is what we need in the modern world. To go places where it seems God might not be mentioned, and to find what they're doing there. So I'll give you an example from my own past. So I'm a sociologist. Sociology is not considered one of the most spiritual or religious activities that people engage in. Sociologists, in a certain sense, analyze and deconstruct society. So they take it apart in little pieces, and it's not clear what you have left or how you put them back together. Right? But I'll tell you, as a young Jesuit going in the field of sociology with an open mind, I said, wow, there are amazing tools here for finding the truth, for reflecting on justice, for understanding how people put meaning together. So I found that even in sociology, that seemingly secular discipline, people are doing things that involve truth and meaning, justice and hope. Um, and I'm very grateful for the colleagues that I have in sociology. One of the interesting things too that I encountered was that when I took my field exam in sociology, my comps, all right, for the doctorate. There we were in the room, and I was at the UC San Diego, and there was my mentor. He was a former Maryknoll. He'd been ordained a priest, so he's still a priest technically. And there was an Episcopalian priest who was a sociologist, and there was another fellow who was a wonderful inspiration in my career. Won't name names and embarrass people, but I sort of looked around the room and I said, "There are out of the four of us here, there are three of us who are priests."
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, good turnout.
Yeah. So, but the point is that there is this charism of finding God in the midst of things, even in circumstances where the church hasn't planted its flag, so to speak. So I think that is certainly a gift and a charism for that we need in the modern world,
Yeah.
and certainly something that you need in China. Um, it might not be that everybody is registered on a card that they're Catholic,
Right.
but that doesn't mean that God is not at work in their lives, and that
Right.
there's something very important happening there. And if there's any contribution that we can bring, it's to enter into dialogue with people, to find out, to inquire, what is going on.
Just like the road to Emmaus, that's our logo of our podcast, but that's the model Christ gave us, just walking along the road. And then you find those opportunities to you identify where God is, and those bridges for evangelization, if you will.
Yeah, really like Father Mike, what you said about really kind of going into this really secular field, sociology, and finding a way to bring the gospel there. If sociology is more secular than it should be, it's probably because Catholics have failed to bring the gospel there, and because not enough of us have stepped up to say, like, yeah, I'll take that field seriously.
Yeah, we
And
shouldn't
maybe
be afraid of it. I remember loving sociology in high school. I thought it was the coolest stuff.
Yeah. So I'm curious, Father Peter, you've now been in America long enough that you could probably you have some good insights into the way we live the faith here, the way we practice and follow in the footsteps of Jesus. What can U.S. Catholics learn from our Chinese Catholic brothers and sisters about how to be disciples of Jesus?
Wow. I think we can learn from each other. I mean,
Okay.
Even though I have seen some unpleasant thing in here, but I also think many beautiful things. Personally, I think each one of us is a living gospel, and as long as we do our best to witness to the glory beauty of the gospel and do testimony, we will be influential and people will be touched by our love for Jesus, for the gospel. I think to some extent, the young Catholics in the U.S. and the young Catholics in China, they are struggling the same thing, suffering from the same thing. The Chinese culture is heavily westernized. Yeah. So just as I mentioned before, I noticed they have a great hunger for something higher, and for us, I mean, particularly for me as a Chinese priest, also as a Catholic, I think one of my responsibilities point out that to them and try to do my best to be a living gospel.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. I really like the way you reframed that, because I think it points to the reality that uh, the human struggle with sin is pretty universal, and the problems that we face here are probably faced by everybody in the world, and yet the correct answer is to be a living gospel. And
To be the
there
gospel.
was
Yeah.
a phrase you used, the glory beauty of the gospel, and I really love that, and that should inspire all of us. Father Mike, it looked like you were about to say something.
Well, I was going to ask Father Peter to tell you a little bit about the diocese that he comes from and the town and the situation of Catholics there to make things a little concrete.
Well, that would be
That'd be great. Yeah, let's hear it.
So tell them, where in China you come from and your diocese and so forth.
Okay, I'm from Xingtai, Hebei, Xingtai City, Hebei Province, and in Xingtai there are 3 dioceses, and there is no bishop in these 3 dioceses.
Wow.
Yeah. There are lots of kind of gray area.
Mhm.
It cannot to explain or to conclude in a sentence or in a few words. But even though there is no bishop, these 3 dioceses are thriving spiritually.
Wow.
The people are very traditional and very pious. They want to hear the word of God, and they want someone to explain to them what does it mean, because we do not have that resource. That's the reason why I'm here.
Yeah.
I will bring knowledge and my experience to them. What else?
Well, yeah, and maybe a little bit about how there were 3 dioceses, right?
Yeah.
And they had to make a choice about whether or not to cooperate with the government and so forth. So you're.
Oh, yeah. For example, my diocese before 2007 was underground. We still use that term, yeah.
Mhm.
But in 2007, the previous Pope, Benedict XVI, he wrote a letter to the church in China. In that letter, he tried to reconcile those 2 churches in mainland China. So after that, my administrator made a decision to come out, because if you want to do something, to do more things, you have to cooperate with the government or deal with the government. So since then, my diocese started working or cooperating with the government. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Right. I don't know if you know the whole history of what happened to religion in China, but certainly when the Chinese Communist Party took power in 1949, they wanted their country back. It had been invaded by Japan. It had been dominated by European colonial powers. And so they asked the foreigners to please get out.
Yeah.
And they did tend to see Christianity as linked to foreign domination.
Yeah.
And so they began to restrict Christianity. And during something called the Cultural Revolution, Chairman Mao wanted to purify China of anything that differed from his own ideological perspective. So he even had to purify the Communist Party to get people to see things his way, or to line people up with his vision. So during the Cultural Revolution, things went from being restrictive to religion to eliminating all religion, not just Christianity or Islam, but all religion was outlawed. And for 10 years, from 66 to 76, it seemed like there was no religion at all. If you went to
Wow.
China, all of the temples, all of the churches, all of the mosques were closed.
Wow.
So it was a very bleak time if you were a believer. And nobody knew whether or not religion, especially Christianity, which had been a minority faith, whether or not it would survive. First, the restrictions of the 50s, and then the 60s and the 70s, and being outlawed. And when in 1949, when the Communist Party came to power, there were about maybe 3 million Catholics in China. So after 3 decades of persecution in the late 70s, early 80s, what was left? So when people actually took stock, it seemed that not only had the faith not collapsed, but there were about 8 million Catholics in China.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Wow.
So 3 decades of persecution did more for the faith than 400 years of missionary work.
Yeah. My
Um,
goodness.
Not that I would wish persecution on anyone, and not
No, yeah, yeah.
not that it really is the direct result of persecution. It's the
Right.
result of people holding on to their faith in difficult times because they see it has value.
Yeah.
And as a result of them taking responsibility for their own faith, it
Right.
wasn't a missionary, it's no longer a foreign enterprise or a missionary activity. This is the faith of the Chinese people themselves.
I love that. Wow. Wow. Justin, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a lot we can learn from in this country. I think a lot of people here are actually starting to embrace that mindset more because while there's statistics that show a lot of people leaving the church, and the younger generation, the people that are staying really want to safeguard the church, safeguard the faith, pass it on to the next generation. So it'll be really interesting to see what the church in the US looks like in the next 30, 40 years, because the faith, the remnant, the folks still in it are working so hard to preserve it and pass it on.
Yeah.
So.
It sounds like there's, excuse me, there's no accidental Catholics in China or in the United States anymore. If we're Catholic, we're Catholic by
Yes.
deliberate choice.
That's right.
So that makes me real curious because of the great focus of Pope Francis on missionary discipleship. That's kind of a vogue term in the United States right now, that we talk about missionary discipleship and are really trying to encourage and animate people to live a life where they intentionally share the gospel with other people, both fallen away Catholics and Christians and people who've never really been touched by the gospel. Father Peter, do you see that same movement in China where people are embracing the idea of missionary discipleship?
Yeah. In recent years, it's getting more and more obvious because lots of people recent years they got some training from their diocese or their parish. So and also they would like to spend time to share how faith impact their lives with their neighbors, and those neighbors are usually do not have faith. Yeah.
Well, I have one more question because I'm almost out of time. I'm just really curious. Is there a particular devotion that is very popular in China, such as to Our Lady under a certain title or certain saints?
Well, there's the famous pilgrimage site.
Yeah, you can introduce Shushan.
Okay, so I would say one of the most famous pilgrimage sites in China is outside of Shanghai. There's a shrine to Our Lady of Shishan there, and she is the protectress of China. In other words, people prayed to Our Lady during times of persecution, and there were earlier waves of persecution in the centuries preceding, and they prayed to Mary to intercede on their behalf. And so this shrine remembers those times, and it was erected in honor of Mary and in imploring her intercession for the protection of Christians in China.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I know we're coming up on our time limit here, and I wanted to ask really both of you, what else would you like to share about the U.S. China Catholic Association, and especially for people who are listening? I know you mentioned the Mary Knoll organization, how else could people support the USCCA, Maryknoll, or really any of the efforts you're doing to help bring the gospel to more and more people in China?
Well, I would say this. First, we are having a conference this upcoming weekend. I don't think this podcast will go out in time for that. But at this conference, we are bringing together priests and sisters from China, academics, people from China, people from the United States who have really done a lot to explore the ways that Christianity has grown in its encounter with China and that Chinese civilization has embraced the gospel. So we'll have a number of academic presentations on Saturday. People can join online if they find out in time. But we'll be recording these things and making them available later as well.
We will put the link in our show notes so folks can find it later too. We'll put the link here.
Very good.
Yeah.
So one of the people who will be speaking is a fellow who is a convert himself. He has taken on the name Agliardo in honor of the founder of Focolare.
Oh, wow.
He's a member of Focolare and very committed to evangelization, especially working with young people in China. He has a doctorate from the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome, and he works in China. And he's been very instrumental in helping the Chinese church to see the moment, to see to move forward into the contemporary circumstance. He himself, as I said, is a convert, so he understands the process that people go through in exploring the faith, and he understands the questions that they have. So his talk is one of the talks that I would like to recommend to people if they want to understand the circumstances of young people in China, their minds and hearts, and how to share with them. I would also like to say this: the U.S. Catholic China Association is launching over the course of the next year a program called our Campus Engagement Initiative. It turns out that, as you may be aware, there are over 400,000 students from China who come to the United States for studies, either in high school or at the university level.
Yep.
That is a great tribute to America. It's a recognition that we do have a fine educational system that leads people to open their minds. But what we sometimes fail to appreciate is that when somebody's coming from a very different context, they might not even understand the questions that we're asking, never mind the answers that we're giving. And that's especially true when Chinese young people show up on a Catholic campus.
Yeah.
They didn't even know it was Catholic before they got there. They're thrown into a theology or a philosophy class, and they say, well, I hadn't even thought about these questions. I don't even understand what they mean. And you're only giving me the answers. So I think we have to do a better job of engaging Chinese young people who come to the United States, welcoming them, because they're not here to steal our nuclear secrets. They're here for an education. Education is an opportunity to share what we have, informing other people. They should be welcomed and embraced as friends.
Mm-hmm.
There may be a few spies there who are trying to get, secrets on artificial intelligence. But when somebody is in your philosophy or theology class, that's probably not what they're about.
Right.
Or your English literature class, or all these other things. That
Father, I just got to share, in grad school for business school, I had several Chinese classmates, and one of them, was interested in spiritual things. He came over to my house for a Bible study. We talked about religion, and but I wish I had done more with that opportunity, to be honest. But I will tell you, there was a spiritual hunger within him, and he ended up going back to China for his job. He had a job opportunity here in China. He chose to go back home to be near family. But a reminder to at least be praying for him, my former classmate, John.
Okay,
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
And well, thank goodness that you did invite him. I would like to encourage people, when you see those opportunities, take them also not as an opportunity just to give, but also to learn and receive.
Yes.
Because the questions that these people have might be different than questions you've ever had, and they might get you to see things from a new perspective. And that is an opportunity for growth. We should reach out to the people who are here on our shores. and
Amen.
and not just let them pass by in the night and go back to their country after they've
Yeah.
dropped off their tuition dollars. That's
Yeah.
not,
So I'll have to email you, Father Mike, to possibly get some more resources for our diocese, because the diocese where I work, we have a large number of Chinese students who are studying in the Catholic high schools. And I used to teach in a Catholic high school, and I remember I formed some very good relationships. Actually, I want to ask both of you to pray for Hao Tian Huang. And he asked those exact questions you're talking about, Father Mike. I'm haunted by some of those
That was one of your
conversations.
summer stories, Dan. One of our
Yeah,
episodes
yeah.
from over the summer was talking about him and the questions he asked.
Yeah, there were two things that he said that I remember very clearly. I was trying to explain how the Holy Spirit works to help us, lead us to holiness, and I said the Holy Spirit gives us grace, and he said, "How? What on earth does that mean?" And I was like, "Well, I've never thought about that. I just took it for granted because
That's a
I
hard
grew up hearing
question.
that." Yeah, and then he took Christianity so seriously because I was explaining forgiveness and how we're called to forgive just as the Father forgives us. And he said, "So you mean to tell me if somebody killed my mommy that I would have to forgive him if I were Christian?" And I said, "Yes, that's what that means." And he said, "Then I can't be Christian because I can't imagine forgiving somebody who would kill my mommy." And I thought, like, you understand what I'm saying. You're not just saying like, "Oh yeah, okay, that sounds nice." Like, he realizes that's impossible without God. So he was an awesome young man, and he went by the name Klaus. So Klaus, I hope you're listening out there. Know that we're praying for you. Well, Father Peter, I wanted to ask if you would do us the favor of giving us a final blessing in your native language, in beautiful Chinese.
OK，全能仁慈的天主，感谢你对我们一直以来的陪伴，希望你特别的降福我们，聆听这个节目的每一位，打开我们的心，使我们能够接受你的圣神，用我们的口，用我们的行动，去向世人显示出我们是你的门徒。也特别降福，我们接下来3天的 USCCA 的 conference， 希望一切能够顺利。是
降福他们。
OK， 我现在因父及子及圣神之名降福你们。
Amen. Well, Father Mike and Father Peter, thank you so much. It was a real pleasure talking with both of you, and please count on our prayers for both of you individually, for the USCCA, for all of our brothers and sisters in the faith in China, those who already know the Lord and those who do not yet know him, but who will soon by the grace of God. And if there's ever an opportunity to come back on the show, we'd love to have you. And we will also make sure to promote that great conference coming up so that people can learn more about the good things going on in China, what God's doing.
Well, thank you very much. And I look forward to staying in touch, Dan.
Likewise. All right. Thanks so much. God bless you both. Take care.
God
Bye.
bless.
Take care. Bye.